My name is John Lockett. I am with Loop One. Been with Loop One about 2 years. I've been working with the SolarWinds product for a little over 9. Prior to working at Loop One, I was at SolarWinds for a year there in Austin, working as part of the sales engineer and ISR teams down there. So, um, joined with us today is Jason Henson. He's a global technical director at Loop One. Why don't you take some time and introduce yourself there, Jason?
Great, thanks, John. Like John said, my responsibilities here, Global Director of Technical Solutions. 13 years here with Loop One, and about 7 years approximately with SolarWinds before that. So, been with both companies since right about the beginning. So a lot of history here. Happy to be here, and I'll be running Q&A today as well as operating in the chat. So, thanks.
All right. Joining us from Austin, Texas. Actually, I think he's out of Colorado, but SolarWinds is out of Austin. We have Dean Richards, man. He is the master of wizardry when it comes to database programming, database monitoring there at SolarWinds. Got a couple calls with him with customers when I was there. So it was really nice having him in the mix. Why don't you take some time and introduce yourself, Dean?
Sure, Dean Richards, and I've been part of the database group at SolarWinds and acquired companies for 15 plus years, and have been a DBA, a developer, all different things there. But glad to be part of the show today. Thanks.
Appreciate you joining us and lending us your knowledge. All right. A little bit about Loop One. We are a SolarWinds Elite partner. We were appointed in 2022. We have been with SolarWinds, 20 years? With EMEA and it was EMEA in 12 here. Got 100 plus employees globally here in the US, in the UK, Ireland, Sri Lanka, and Germany. All of our engineers carry multiple SCPs, so very knowledgeable, as well as the sales staff. Work primarily with Fortune 500 companies and up. So been around for quite a while, and we've worked with some of the bigger companies around the world. All right, SolarWinds. Let's start this out with server and application monitor, since we're talking about databases. All of us know that applications work at multiple levels. You have the hardware level, you have the operation level, and then you also have the application layer. So SolarWinds allows you to look at it in all 3 states. Here I'm showing you the hardware. So from a simple screen right off with no details, you can see what's going on with your hardware. How's the CPU doing? How's the memory? What OS am I running? When was the last time it was booted? Quick and easy, give you information as to what's going on with the server maybe your database is running off of. Also, from there you can grab key indicators. This is a couple of widgets that you can pull from the SAM screen. This gives you a quick 100,000 foot view of what's going on with your applications. Which ones are up, any that are critical, unknown. You can drill down into these and then get even more data once you get further into the program. All right, SolarWinds, App Insight for SQL. We've talked about the operation level. We talked about the hardware level. App Insight lets us look at it from the application point of view. So this is looking at it from basically from the SQL point of view. And here you can get some really basic as well as some in-depth KPIs around how your database is performing. These are all indicators of what's going on. You can drill into these and get in some more information. All right, but today we are going to talk about integration and talk about some of the other tools that SolarWinds has. Basically, what's going on behind the curtain, because all of us as administrators and both network and server know that SQL and databases are there. We know that they cause traffic and they can cause problems, but a lot of times we don't know what's going on with them because it's a mystery behind what's kind of like in the Wizard of Oz, what's behind the curtain, you know? Well, in steps SolarWinds with DPA, with DPM and some of the other offerings that'll let you look at your databases from a database point of view. What's going on within the database? How can I better handle it? Is there something going on that's stopping it in the hardware level, in the operating level? These are all information that you can pull from some of the deeper dives that you can get into get with SolarWinds. So with that, I will let you off with Dean. He is the wizard of this, so we'll let him be the guy behind the curtain.
All right, thanks, John. Just a little bit about the portfolio here now at SolarWinds. They acquired DPA back in 2014, but since then they've been building this portfolio and really rounding it out to include other things as well. So DPA is that cross-platform database monitoring tool where it supports Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, Postgres, DB2, so a variety of different platforms that it supports. SQL Sentry was acquired within a couple years ago, and it is really that deep dive into the SQL Server world. So much deeper into the Windows OS, into database jobs and the metrics and the SQL Server engine itself. And they do have several things in common, but SQL Sentry is also known for its robust alerting engine to let you know when things are happening and that sort of thing. Database Performance Monitor, DPM, was acquired again a couple years ago as well, and it's the cloud SaaS solution. So it can monitor, and I guess it was kind of built around Postgres and MySQL, so those open source databases, MongoDB as well, and some of those, but it also supports SQL Server now as well. Task Factory is, if you're doing any SSIS development, it's really a must-have. It's 60 plus pre-built components that you can use to do things much more efficiently, faster, better, all of those kind of combined. And then finally, Database Mapper. I feel like it was a tool that I was missing when I was a DBA and developer, because what it does is it helps document things for you, stored procedures, tables, servers. So it pulls all of the metadata about those into a nice GUI, and then allows you to do some change management type things. For example, if I need to modify a column in a table, what stored procedures actually hit that table? And then also it does data lineage. So how is data flowing back and forth between SSIS, stored procedures, Power BI. So it supports 30 different platforms, including SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, some of those. So it really kind of helps round out things and really puts information at your fingertips about the environment. All right, next slide, John.
Roger that, boss.
All right. So from a DPA perspective, so we are here talking about DPA, and I'll demo the product soon. But when you talk about our monitoring solutions, these are all of the platforms that we do support. Again, DPA is more of that cross-platform. DPM does as well, supporting a broad variety of those databases. And then SQL Sentry is that power tool into the SQL Server environment. But that also includes cloud servers as well, right? So it supports Azure, both from a managed instance and SQL database, and most recently we brought back the Azure Synapse support there as well. And it also supports SQL Server analysis services, so SSAS. So it really does help kind of round out the solution and a broad support base for many different database platforms. All right. Well, let me share my screen here, and we'll jump into a demo of DPA. And John, are you seeing my screen?
I am.
Okay. All right. Good deal. All right, so DPA is a product that you would download and install on-prem, or you might install it into a virtual machine up in the cloud if you want to monitor Azure or Amazon type databases. And it does have broad support for, again, Postgres, MySQL, Oracle, DB2, and so forth. The front page that we're looking at right now is really a good summary of your entire estate. So in my case, I've grouped things by database platform down here, so you can see those. But you can group them however you like. But then there are some quick critical and warning signs here that let you know about problems in the background. So DPA is a tool that does focus on SQL statements, and because that really is the fundamental unit of work for any database. Even when backups are done or integrity checks or whatever you might be doing, those come in the form of SQL statements. So DPA will capture those, and then it will also show you query level weight analysis. So we'll kind of dive into that and show you what that really means. DPA also collects operating system metrics, so you'll see CPU, memory, and disk metrics as part of it, because if you find that a query, for example, is waiting on disk IO, well, what do the disk metrics look like? Or if it's waiting on who knows what, right? You can kind of correlate some of those resource metrics to it. So I'm going to drill into this one instance we have down here. And the first page that you do get to is a SQL tab. And this is a 30-day rolling window of performance. Each of the bars here represent a day's summary. So it's kind of a 50,000 foot level view into your environment, looking at SQL, the queries and things like that. The color slices represent individual SQL statements. So we can see the select statement here, and then also some high-level summary here about it. 137 executions, 77 seconds on average, which equates to that wait time number up there of 2 hours and 56 minutes. If you kind of think about that differently, whatever is running this query, whatever application or an end user on the other end of that, they had to spend 2 hours and 56 minutes just waiting on this query to complete on this particular day. And you can also see that just based on its position, it is our number 2 query in the environment. Here's our number 1 query. And then even furthermore, just visually, you can almost see what 5 main colors here. So these are really the 5 SQL statements that are probably consuming about half of the wait time in this environment. So, and overall, what we're showing here is the top 15 queries over the last 30 days, and it's all ranked based on that wait time number. So these are the ones that are causing your end users the most delays. And if you can tune some of these, you're going to have the most impact as well to the application. The application will run faster. To the hardware, like John was mentioning earlier, you'll use less resources typically. So there's a lot of reasons that tuning the queries will be helpful here. But what we often recommend once you get a view like this of your top SQL is just dive into each one of them and see what DPA tells you about them. So the chart on top now is all about waits and what this query spends time doing. Now, most of the wait times here, you can see we're earlier on in the week, and now we've got maybe some days where it doesn't even execute, or maybe it's executing so quickly we're not even, very little wait time there. But this is kind of a 30-day history. The big green bar, which is kind of the most prominent here, is actually a non-wait. It's consuming CPU, and often it's reading data from memory. So that's why we call it memory CPU. The second wait here is page IO Latch. And if you're unfamiliar with these waits, we do have help built right into the product. So you can see what the wait typically means, solutions for solving that, and then some quick links for even additional research if you need to. Anywhere here on this screen, you can dive into a particular day, and then you can see the waits for that particular day. There's also some nice controls where you can scroll to a day before, day later, You can pick any really format. If you wanted to look at this even longer term, if you've got 90 days of data, you could even view a 90-day view or the last hour or anywhere in between. You can specifically set your start and end dates here as well. Where I typically start with things is I'll review the SQL text and review the query itself and start to understand a little bit more about it. So this is selecting from somewhere called Event Source History. And then I review the supporting data tab. This will tell me where this query comes from. So this is actually a SQL Sentry query, it looks like. So we're using our own tools to monitor all of our other tools as well, so that we know that they're performing well. So we're monitoring a SQL Sentry environment here. And you can see the database that it came from, the user. So like in your case, in the real world, if you had an application running, you would most likely see whatever database that application is hitting and the user itself, the machine it came from, and even a little bit about the application name here. Now, armed with all that information, I will give it a name. So instead of following a number around, let's follow a name that has a little bit more meaning. And then you can add comments about the SQL. So whatever you know about it, add some comments here. So that way, when the next person comes in, they'll have some of that knowledge already right in front of them. The intelligent analysis screen is DPA's approach to helping you tune the query, really is what it comes down to. And it will look for different items. So it'll parse the plan. So in this case, it found that we were doing a full table scan in this. That's what the plan mentions. Here is the wait activity. And even a little bit more here is that this query on this particular day was taking longer than it normally does. So the average was 2 minutes, 53 seconds, where the historical average was really 3 seconds. So it's running a lot longer than it normally does today, which is interesting. Now the other thing you see here is that we've got some tuning advice. So you can dive right into the plan. You can view the pretty simple plan here, but then here is the plan advice that we pulled directly from SQL Server. So this is SQL Server's advice. So we're just presenting it to you. Do with it whatever that you want to, but it looks like it could have a decent impact in this case. All right, so this screen is all about that one query, right? And I think it was our number 5 query, but I often recommend go through your top 5 or 10 or 15 SQL statements and look for some low-hanging fruit. It's oftentimes, if you tune just a handful of queries, you'll make a huge impact on application performance, resource consumption, and all of that. So don't worry about the hundreds that are running. Worry about the top ones that are causing delays. Table tuning advisors, I'll go through that in a second. That's another tab that we have more information on. Here's some statistics about the SQL statement, so numbers of executions, and this is all correlated to this particular hour and other SQL metrics. If there is blocking, you would see it here. There's no blocking in this case, but DPA does show 2 perspectives of blocking, and this is not a great example for that, but the bottom chart is how long this query was blocked. That's kind of the classic approach, right? Well, the query is being blocked by something else. But the other side of it is, well, what if this query is actually causing blocking problems? So that's what we mean by a root blocker. So if it's a root blocker, again, tuning it will make it run faster, but then it'll also block less. So it'll have a double impact in that case. So we often say look for those root blockers. Here's a plan chart. This is the plans that were utilized. So DPA picks the plan that was being utilized when the query was running. So in this case, it had the same plan all day. If you notice a plan change, you would notice all of a sudden another plan, another color would come in, and then you would also see, is that plan better or worse or maybe the same, whatever that that looks like. And then some instance level metrics as well. So we see that this query is spending most of its time consuming CPU. Well, what does CPU look like? So here we have two charts that are showing you the instance level CPU and then the OS level CPU. So in this case, I would probably start asking questions like, well, the OS is up there in the 90s, which is above the critical. This instance is only what, in the 30s? What else is running on this this machine? Or maybe there's another instance there, or whatever that looks like. But I would certainly start looking for potentially another app that's running or something else is going on to consume that CPU. Page life expectancy is in the tubes. You know, it's all the way down to 5 or so during this particular day here, and then some other metrics. And you can choose whatever metrics that you want to correlate. And there's 50 or so different metrics, including custom metrics that you can add. So if DPA doesn't have that one metric that you really like, well, you can add it directly into the to the product. So and extend kind of the functionality there. All right, so really this screen is that deep dive into a single query, and hopefully we have some advice for you for tuning. So we focused on the SQL tab right now, and we focused on the total weight. We also have some other views into this data. So we can look at the average weight screen, which I call the long running query screen essentially, but it's the queries that are on average taking longer. So on one day, we had quite a few of these that were running for hours, it looks like, in these cases. So just a different perspective. And then typical day will show you when things are running, what times of the day. In our case, this is a 24/7. It's just always monitoring and doing things. But if your application is fairly dormant during the night, you would see smaller bars earlier, and then a kind of a bell-shaped curve probably when activities go up, and then they come back down at night. So it's a good screen just to kind of tell you when certain things are happening or when certain things are not happening. Let's say you had a new database job you needed to introduce, and you saw that the 8 p.m. time frame was pretty much idle. Well, maybe that's a good time for running that, or whenever that makes sense. We also have views into the weights themselves. So this is now a chart that shows you what you're spending time waiting on. And again, these are clickable. So if you want to know what these weight types represent, just click on any one of them to view that. There's also a view for the applications that are running here. So which applications are consuming the most? Which databases are they hitting? What machine? What user? So all of these different things are really, it's all the same wait time. It's just kind of sliced by these different dimensions, if you will. Now, in this case, if you did so we've kind of been looking at it at the 50,000 foot level, but let's say that somebody's actually complaining about performance now, and you happen to know that it was one of these databases here. Let's just call it this RML HCO instance, or the Webinar SQL. Maybe that's a better one. It's our number 2 database overall, and they were complaining yesterday. So what I would do is drill into yesterday. And then, well, what time was the problem? Well, it happened around 12:15 in the afternoon. Well, let's drill into 12 to 1. And then let's drill into the database that's having problems. So this is Webinar SQL. Drill into that. And then they said the problem was around 12:15. So we're looking at 12 to 1, probably a little too wide to really understand. So let's go to time slice and let's drill deeper. In this screen, there's some controls, so I could look at a minute by minute view here if I wanted to. I could draw all the way down to a second by second view as well. So DPA not only has that high level data, but it gets you to some pretty low level details as well. Now, in this case, I would probably say if an end user complained around 12:15, I would drill into 12:10 to 12:20, maybe 5 minutes on either side of that, and then go to the SQL tab. So here now is a list of queries, and remember, it's only the ones that were coming from that Webinar SQL database. So these are our filters right now: the day, the time, the database. So if somebody's complaining about this app, here are the queries that were really spending the most time, right? Causing the most delays. And they're ranked very quickly. Now, likely, it's probably these top 3 queries that you should focus on, because as you get down the list here further, these queries, caused all of 9 seconds worth of wait time. Probably not the issue, probably the ones up here. Now, the other interesting thing here, bringing it down to this query level weight analysis, is that we can see that the second query here, there was a blocking problem. Okay, that's pretty interesting. And actually the fourth one down as well, were being blocked, so they're kind of the victims. Now, anytime you see something like that, we have a tab that specializes in drilling into those details. So in this case, we had 3 root blockers during this time frame, and then we can drill into the hierarchy here to see what was happening. So 169 was blocking blocking 87, which in turn was blocking 254, which was in blocking 132, and so forth. So you can see the whole hierarchy here as you need to. Now, it was also blocking a bunch of other sessions here as well. Now, what all of these were doing were really the same thing. They were all trying to execute the same exact stored procedure. Well, what was 169 doing? It was the root blocker. So let's drill in and see what it was running. Well, it was running the same procedure. So it looks like maybe there's a little bit of just blocking from that perspective. And if I click on that SQL, it will take me to the SQL page that we started with, really. So that's the main root blocker in this case. And it was waiting on CPU. So it was just kind of busy for a couple of seconds, but it blocked some things behind it during that time frame. So a good way to kind of dive into blocking scenarios and figure out what was happening and what applications were causing it. All right, so that's really the trends side of it. So you again get this 50,000 foot level view where you can quickly tell which queries you should focus on. Also, you can then drill into a day and a time that a problem was happening, and again, go all the way down to a second by second view if you ever need to. One of the things that we also allow you to do is annotate things, because there's changes happening all the time, and they can affect performance as well. So here is an annotate button, so you can plop that in, and then that'll show up on screens as you're drilling through the product. So as you see something that is happening, and if you notice that an annotation said, we upgraded the application at this point, okay, that might tell you something about, well, this is probably something new, or something's behaving differently at that point. And these can be automated too. So if you've got a build process and you want to put an annotation every time you do a build, you can call a DPA API to kind of do that as part of your build scripts as well. The other thing here on this screen is anomaly detection. So DPA learns, so it has a machine learning algorithm built into it that learns the behavior of your database instance, and it does that based on wait times. So it works best for those production boxes that have kind of a standard load through them, right? Like a reporting server or a warehouse can have sporadic loads, so it's probably not quite as good in those cases. But for most production boxes, it can learn the behavior, and then if a problem happens, it will know that there's a problem based on excessive wait times. And like blocking scenarios, they cause more wait times. All of a sudden, a poorly tuned query runs, it causes more wait time. So those will all be flagged kind of by this anomaly detection. And in this case, we can actually drill in. So we had an anomaly detected on Friday. Well, when was, so we can click into that anomaly, and we'll see that it started around 3 p.m. on the 28th. All right, so then we can drill into 3 p.m. on the 28th and see all of the queries that we're executing during this time and which ones of them are really running slower than normal. Or you might use the weights tab to see which weights all of a sudden show up, like this resource semaphore query compile. That was a new weight that we saw while doing this. And again, if you click on that, you'll get a description. Not as much of a description here, but what we found is that by researching this a little bit more, there was actually a bug in SQL Server that was causing some issues. So we were able to apply a patch and then fix that. And then you can kind of see, if you look at the weights here, that was one of the big weights that showed up during that time frame, and it hasn't shown up since. And also our wait times are actually better. So the patch definitely helped that, but a few other things there as well. But that's let DPA tell you when things are abnormal, and it's a great alert to configure to tell you that. All right. The other tab that I really like to focus on when, and this is me just using the tool. So I've been on the other side as well, using this as a DBA, looking into performance issues. And the tuning tab is something that I go to regularly. And this is a historical tab as well. So if you had a problem, yesterday, you can go back to yesterday and see what happened. So we have 3 advisors here. One of them is the query advisor, and you'll notice that we'll point out if any one of these queries have some tuning advice, or if they're doing full table scans, or just any other interesting information about the query. And if I click into this query, I'll be taken to that same page that we kind of started with, where you can very quickly see what that tuning advice is. The other advisor that I like to use is the table advisor. So what this tries to do is roll things up to a table level. And the theory is, well, if you can tune many queries at once, you're going to be more efficient at doing this. So the query advisors are great, but they are just a single query at a time. Table advisor is multiple queries. So for this event source history table, you'll see that there's 3 queries and index recommendations for it. So if we dive into that table, we now get a view of the workload. So here are the queries themselves. And that one that I looked at earlier was called event source history. It's 48% of the workload. There's also another one here that's 51%. And then there's finally a third one that's a relatively small workload. But the way to read this screen is, for whatever query that you have selected here, DPA will show you the plans. And in fact, this particular query had 2 plans during this day, so we're showing both of them. We also parsed through the plan and found that here's the inefficient step. It's reading this, it's a full table scan. Clustered index scan essentially means full table scan. We show you the predicates and other information here. And by the way, this table has 1 million rows in it. That's why we're pointing this out to you. And we have a recommendation. Here's an index that we feel will help this. And if you scroll to the right, you'll get that percentage of help, 89%. Now this has a bunch of include columns in it. I wouldn't go crazy and do all of those. So again, these, you want to take these with under advisement, and I wouldn't implement them as they are, but it looks like it could have a good improvement there. If we click to the second query, it has the same recommendation. So it looks like this index recommendation will solve both of those problems. In fact, you notice here, this was also recommended for 2 other queries. And actually, it'll have a big impact on all 3 of these queries. So again, tune multiple things at a time makes you more efficient. But just knowing that the workload on this table is also beneficial. Oftentimes people will say, well, what if I add an index? Aren't other queries going to run slower that are doing inserts or updates? So we do provide some extra table information down here, and one of those values is something called table churn. So what this means is that 6% of the data on average churns, meaning it gets added, deleted, or updated. So it's not a super high amount. So what that tells me is an additional index is probably not going to harm performance, or it might harm a little bit for those queries. It's always a game, right? How much are we going to save versus how much are we going to add? So if we can save hours of processing time, it's probably worth a little bit of harm to those index or insert statements on the back end. We also will give you some best practices. So we found some overlapping indexes, meaning we've got indexes that have the exact same leading edge to them. Not always a bad thing, but just pointing that out. Or if an index hasn't been used, so this one hasn't been used in 192 days, maybe it's something we could get rid of and save some space potentially. So all kinds of good deals, and it's all kind of focused on the table, the workload on the table, but then the current indexes and other details as well. Now with DPA, we've kind of focused on historical items with the trends and the tuning page, but the current tab is another great resource if someone's complaining right now about performance. So this gets you very quickly to the last hour of data here that's segregated by 10-minute chunks. This bar is a real-time bar, so it is 10:30 to 10:38, and you can see the queries that are running. If somebody's complaining about performance, what I've typically found is that you get a big bar in here that represents a query that is suddenly either running longer or just consuming most of that time. So it kind of sticks out like very, very quickly there. You can see the currently active sessions if there's any blocking happening. You can drill into the active sessions as needed. Here are some key metrics that we brought up. So in this case, our CPU is spiking right now. So that's an interesting thing, and page life is kind of down in the tube still on this instance. For any one of these, I can click on the metric and it will take me to the resources tab. So it's just another tab here. So if you don't want to focus on queries and tuning and that sort of thing, you want to focus on some of this, you can. And again, it has the date chooser where you can go back in time and look at longer term metrics or short term, however you want to look at it. We also paint baselines. So you can see that for this instance that, yep, we're well within our kind of baselines here. And the baseline is actually pretty tight. So that also tells me that, I might set an alert on this metric that if it ever goes above 50%, maybe in this case, that's probably, something I should know about. Forget about 70, 80, 90%. What's abnormal here is probably 50% or so. So I could set that. You can see the OS and a bunch of other metrics here. We've also got custom metrics, as I mentioned, like page splits is not something that's a base metric, but just feel free to add whatever you need to, and then you can use these to correlate to the performance. And where you would do that correlation is really back on the trends page. So there's a resources tab here. So as you drill in, this follows kind of right along with it. So you can kind of see here that when that anomaly popped up, we had that wait on resource semaphore query compile or something like that. And sure enough, the SQL compilations metric went through the roof as well. And our buffer cache size went down. Our instance CPU actually went up while it was doing waiting on that. So you can add in a variety of different metrics here to do that correlation. All right. We have reports also built into the tool, and from a reporting standpoint, often what you think of is just a single report at a time, and that's what this looks like. So it looks almost identical to the trends. In fact, it is our top SQL statements. But what I'll often do is, well, when are my end users on the system most? let's come in and build a report that will help tell me what they're suffering from the most. In fact, I want to view the top 30 queries. And I'm going to go for the last N days. You can do all available data. In fact, I've got 2 years worth of data here. I could go back and look at a long-term trend of SQL statements if I wanted to. But in this case, I just want to look at the last 2 weeks maybe. And then my users are on the system Monday through Friday. So let's exclude Sundays and Saturdays. You know, who cares what's happening then if we're really trying to affect our end users. And then let's focus on maybe 7 to 5. You know, when are our users on the system? So now I get a customized view of what my top SQL statements are. So it will often point you to, again, the things that if you could tune them, what are going to affect your end users the most. And then you can email directly from here. I can save this as whatever I want to, so I can come back and look at it more afterwards. Now with reports, you can also create what are called report groups. I wish they would have called them dashboards, because that's really what they are. But it really is just a group of those reports that you put together. So here's a group of all of my instances and their top SQLs and top weights kind of correlated to each other. So you can kind of build whatever you want this to look like. And then you can schedule this to be sent periodically. So in this case, we're sending them every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 a.m. So when I was a DBA, what I would love to do is I would create these report dashboards and then send them to my developers, maybe once a week. Like every Monday morning, they would get a report, top SQLs and top weights. And it's surprising how when a developer sees their SQL as one of the top queries, they tend to fix it a little faster, is what I found. Now, I'm not picking on developers, sorry, but it's a good way to communicate to other folks. Maybe they're not a user of DPA. I would like them to be, but maybe they don't. So just seeing that report in their email at least provides them something that is somewhat actionable. And then we've got a whole alerting interface here that can do a variety of things. And I'm not going to spend tons of time here, but you can, here's some examples of some of these different things, whether it's looking at a specific metric, like this case is page splits, the error log, so our errors showing up in our error log. Do we have anomalies happening down here? And a whole host of other details here. So you can come in and see these, and we've got several different categories of these alerts. The wait time alerts are just that. It's those wait time anomalies. Or a lot of times what I'll do is if we fix a query suddenly that, okay, let's make sure that thing stays fixed. So you can have an alert watching that query going forward. And if it ever slows down again, let me know about it. Again, here's the resource metrics page, so you can alert on a single resource. Or what I do is why worry about a single metric? Let's do all metrics in the category. So if any CPU metric goes above its thresholds, let me know about it. So you have fewer alerts that you have to worry about as a result. And then there's some administrative alerts here. SQL Server deadlocks, if you have those, or job failures, or backup frequencies, whatever you want. And we also have a whole host of alerts, custom alerts, I guess you might say. So that's kind of this next tab. If you can write a query, you can essentially extend the functionality of DPA. But we've got a whole host of these on thwack.solarwinds.com. It's our community site. Go in and under Content Exchange, you can find our custom alerts and custom metrics that have been developed. So if you ever want to do a little bit more, you certainly can with those custom alerts. All right. Now, DPA also will monitor your VMware environment. So if you've got databases running on top of VMware, the Virtualization tab will help you do that. I don't have any of those, so I don't have a way to demo that currently. but it provides a nice view and kind of helps answer that question that DBAs have always had. Like, well, how do I know that VMware is not causing a problem? So those screens will help tell you. So there are key indicators down in the VMware stack, and that will tell you if there are problems and if your database is suffering from those issues. So the virtualization tab is great, and it's all part of DPA. There's just one price. You buy a license, you get all of this for that same price. There's no extra modules you have to buy. No extra cost down the road. You get that, and you get all of the features that we've talked about today. So that's kind of my quick view of DPA. And again, remember that if you have SQL servers, DPA will support them, and that's kind of what I looked at today. But then there's also SQL Sentry that takes even a deeper dive into that. Or if you're in the cloud and working with Postgres and MySQL or MongoDB, database performance monitor (DPM) would be a great option from a monitoring perspective as well. So I will stop sharing here. I guess were there any questions that came up during that
So Dean, we'll actually move into a Q&A session here.
All right.
Icebreaker question, since you have this on the screen. How do you pronounce it? Do you pronounce it PostgreSQL, or just default to Postgres?
I default to Postgres.
Do you?
PostgreSQL seems just an extra word there, right? It's kind of implied from my perspective, but I see it all different ways. Yeah, Postgres is.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'll capitalize on my opportunity to run the Q&A, and I'm gonna just make some comments towards some of the things that, as you were going through your demo, that I appreciated. So one, it didn't seem to take you long to get to some really insightful places from the way the DPA is lined up.
Right. One of our mantras when we were developing the tool back in the even before 2010 is that we wanted people to be really down at the root cause of a problem within about 3 or 4 clicks. So as you noticed, like you said, I click into the day, the time, and maybe one other place to really filter by what the problem is, and many times you'll kind of see that that sore thumb sticking out, that there's a problem right there. So yeah.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to bring up my management studio and trying to run a bunch of queries. If I was sitting down with an application and a dev guy, and I'm trying to correlate this and find some answers, I've got it all right here. We can sit down, we can work together, we can find a solution, we can work together and move forward, right?
Exactly. It is since it's browser based, it's a very collaborative tool. If you see something, just copy the URL, or I don't know if you notice, I didn't bring it up, but most pages will have this email where you can email a link to someone and say, hey, take a look at this.
Cool.
And, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't notice that as you were going through it, but now that you pointed out, that's cool. And then I really love, you're pulling it up right there, seeing the trends. I can now go back and I can look at that. I can make decisions. It's not just going back and trying to troubleshoot, but I can actually make decisions going forward based off of the trends that I see here too, right? So it helps with my planning.
Yeah, definitely. And especially if you are a DBA developer and you had a problem application, you might use this screen even to say, see, things are getting better, right? Earlier on, the bars were all taller, and now they're not as tall. So that's maybe it's probably a good thing.
Great.
I'm going to add it from a non-DBA point of view. Personally, I'm not a DBA. I know enough to be very, very dangerous with the program. But I know I've come in to use DPA many times just to answer those questions. Is it hardware? Is it software?
Yeah.
Is it operating system? Is it resources? So that when I do sit down with the teams, like you're saying, Jason, it kind of takes the finger pointing out, hey, you can see where the DBAs have done their job. You can see here in this trend line where things have gone down, but we're still running in slowness. Look back here, you can see where it's having problems with CPU or memory, having blocks there. It just allows somebody who doesn't have a database performance or a database administrator background to really take a look at it and say, okay, now I can talk to my DBAs and okay, tell me what's going on. How can I help you fix this problem?
Yeah, and I find that the persona that I think gets the most benefit from this is the development teams, assuming they're writing the queries that are hitting the database, right? So if they can see the queries that are causing problems, they're the ones that can probably fix them pretty quickly. So yeah, that it's meant for DBAs and developers alike, but it depends on kind of the roles in your company who would get the most benefit. But it is simple to use. I've got managers that use this all the time too, and can dive into the weeds a little bit.
I don't know if I want my managers in here.
Yeah, maybe not give him a username and password, but yeah.
Looking at this trend, Brandon was just commenting here that somebody they put some work in on the 16th. So there you go, getting some answers right away. I'll use that as a segue. A couple of comments in the chat. One, Shannon commented about my shirt. We do here at Loop One, we do a little meeting once a month. So we had a ugly Christmas sweater competition today. So I'm the gangster rapper. As we're coming into Christmas. So I've got a chance to put that on this morning. It's a little early in the season, but I am the gangster rapper today. So thank you, Shannon. The other, we did have a question here from Tony as well. So Tony asked, I'm a brand new DBA, not much experience in this field, and I'm trying to learn as much as possible and get some certifications. What would you recommend for me to learn? Are there any more in-depth tutorials and guides for SolarWinds? It's what my company uses. I'm assuming that means that they're also using some of the Orion products and some of the others, but I'm not sure where to get started with it. So that sounds like Tony may be coming into this maybe from a different discipline in IT and now being thrown into database administration. So do you have any comments there that you might be able to help him out with?
I do. So there's actually many tutorials that are built right into the product. So we didn't want you going anywhere else or trying to fumble around trying to figure out how to use the tool. So there's learn mores on every screen. The home screen is just an introduction to DPA, kind of a getting started. But then as you drill in, there'll be more specific help. I don't know why that's not there. It is. So what is? So here's a bunch of tips on doing things here. In really every screen has that. What we tried to do was document what the screen is telling you, and then what would you do next, essentially. So that's how these documents are typically built here. But if you're looking for getting started type stuff, all of our products have a pretty good getting started guide that will walk you through. This is DPA's guide, but if you're using some of the other HCO products or whatever it might be, we all have these, and these are also good places to go as well.
Well, and I'll make a shameless plug there too for the community, Dean. I think Thwack is a really great resource where we learn from each other at the same time too, right? So thwack.com.
Yeah, definitely.
And then at the same time, just leaning into that community. So we'll give Kevin Sparenberg a plug here, right, for what he's got going on. But SolarWinds user group meetings. So we've had 2 in the United States this year, have been really great. One there in Austin, which was fantastic. I think probably 90% of the people who attended were brand new to the SWUG, to the SolarWinds user group meeting. These are no cost. You just have to get there. So we did one in Austin and we did one in Phoenix. So anyways, really helpful. It's a great set of people that show up, and it's a very much a just practitioners helping practitioners type of a scenario. So come out to the SolarWinds user groups and lean into the Thwack online community for sure.
Yeah, and the product forums are great as well. So if you do have a question about one of our products, just come over and you can post a question, and we have people that are answering that, or other community members can answer that. I mentioned this earlier, but this is where we have our content exchange. So here's some additional custom alerts and metrics that you can plug right into DPA in this case. But then there's also help for other items as well. So it's 2 good places to go on here as well.
Yeah, and then Helen made one quick comment towards HCO, and I think that's a great little reminder there too. I don't know if you want to talk about HCO and DPA.
Yeah, so HCO is is the new name, I guess, or whatever you call it. A lot of people used to call it Orion platform. So we're going away from that. In fact, I have to put a quarter in a jar now that I said the word Orion here. But it is our new platform. It's going to have additional features built into it, especially when it comes to the cloud, and that's really what HCO stands for, hybrid cloud observability.
Mm-hmm.
But DPA is integrated directly in, so you'll notice that when you do integrate, there is a databases dashboard that will get created for you. And this is also a great way if you have multiple installations of DPA. So if you have a pretty big environment, you can really have one single pane of glass to view across those multiple installations. So this is all DPA data now, and as you drill into different things, you'll see the HCO data, but then you'll also have ways of jumping right into the DPA product here. Oops, a little slow. There'll be links, for example, in this management section here, or view trends. That would go to the trends tab in DPA, and these are all kind of those normal tabs. So there is good integration of data coming back into HCO, but then links to go in and do that deep dive with DPA as well.
Mm-hmm. And without getting into a demonstration on HCO and these things, you know, it's probably good to also talk about just the vision here is that, you know, yes, we want DPA to be valuable to our database team, right? But we have silos inside of our organizations that really happen because we have specialties and really smart people focusing on things really deep. But as we look at observability and HCO, what we're trying to do is bridge the gap of information shared across across these disciplines, right? So,
Right.
I mean, trying to get the dev team and the application team and the database team working together and seeing information so that we really deliver a great product back to our organizations. So,
Right. By definition, the observability is kind of
yeah.
meant don't just throw a bunch of data on the screen and let me figure it out. Like tell me what I should do, or tell me how to solve this problem, right? So that's really what the goal is there.
Great. All right. Did we have any other questions that anybody wanted to post up?
Nothing new's come in, Jason, and we're kind of
Okay.
careering towards the top of the hour now. There was one
Thank you.
more quick slide that I wanted to put up. If I can pass back control to you, John. There we go. And if you could just share that final slide, that would be great. We did promise not to do death by PowerPoint, so the slides have been kept to a minimum. Thank you for that deep dive, Dean. There was one point at about 10 past the hour when I thought we were going to finish early, but you definitely did do a deep dive into DPA, so that was great. Thank you. There's a few more slides to go on there, John. And one more, and there we go. So just a real final slide. Obviously, we talked about DPA today. Dean gave an overview of DPM, SQL Sentry, Task Factory, and Database Mapper. There's a link, and I'll share these slides with the webinar recording when I send the follow-up email. There's a link to a free trial. They're all fully functional for 14 days. So if you want to give DPA a try, I will also add HCO in here if you want to dig a bit deeper into HCO as well. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, John, for hosting. Thank you, Dean, for your time. Thank you, Jason, for being the Q&A master. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. And if when you leave today's session, you can complete the survey at the end, that would be much appreciated. Thanks all.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dean.
Thanks, Dean.
Great presentation. I loved it.
Thanks,
Thanks.
John.
Appreciate it. All right, see you guys.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks, Helen.